Hello and welcome to Ideas with Diana on May 13th, 2022. For this show, I'm so dressed in my lounge clothes with they normally wear with the word loved. And the reason why I'm dressed today in casual in my lounge clothes is to make a point. The point is that people are not software, people are not things, people are not services to be canceled, or even a culture. The strangest thing about the change in this paradigm from the post Cold War paradigm to the paradigm that we have now is the rise of hate to justify a certain type of action regarding what was being done that started early after the Olympics. Trying to cancel culture, trying to cancel people, trying to cancel its language. I don't agree with that because basically the problem is what happens is it's gone way too far. I mean, basically, um, although people have issues with what was done by the Russian government, it doesn't mean that you cancel whole people like the Russian people. Even after World War II, when we had the Cold War, we didn't cancel the Chinese culture. We didn't cancel the Russian culture. Then why do we allow hate groups to try to cancel the Russian culture and other cultures now by saying, well, certain people can't play if you don't agree to give up your culture or your language or something. That's foolish. And part of the reason why I say it's foolish is because many of us who lived in Milwaukee, who are Polish and not German on the right side, as actually basically I'm part German, but what happens? I'm German on my mother's side, and my dad is ancestry is Polish. Well, in Milwaukee for many years, up until the 1990s, there's the smother culture. You can work in Milwaukee if you're Polish, if you agreed to have this German culture smothered. And the smothering culture was so great that many people actually would call German Fest Nazi Fest, because basically it really was like a Nazi fest. You could have your culture, but when you're working and when you're out and about, you got to be smothered by this German culture. You can't have. And for example, for many years, Polish Fest was held on a weekend where it always rains. So basically, many people Polish couldn't celebrate the Heritage because it's always raining at the Summerfest grounds. And it took many years for Milwaukee to finally pick a date where it didn't rain, but German Fest was always sunny. So finally, what happened was I and others decided to do something about it. Like when I worked, I actually, someone asked me one time, he was new to Milwaukee, and he said I worked with Dave. He said, well, okay. So well, what don't you like about Milwaukee? I said, well, really, can I tell you? I said, yeah. I said, you sure you want me to? I said, yep. I said, well, there are too many loudmouth Germans, and there's too much of the smother culture, as well as too many Polish jokes. My dad and my grandfather had to endure Polish jokes when they worked, and they had to endure smother culture. And I said, I would not. I said, if I hear one Polish jokes, I'm out the door. I'll quit, and I expect to be able to quit without consequence because I will not stand for that. And a lot of people are surprised. They say, "Well, don't tell her she's there." And what happened was, and at one point, what they tried to do is just the last part of Smother Culture, where they tried to cancel out the Polish culture or anything that wasn't non-Milwaukee German, now loudmouth Milwaukee German, was um, they used to call some of the Polish guys that worked in one lab department, which was run by two um, female chauvinists rather than male chauvinists. They used to call them, oh, there are two lab apes. And what happens, it was done by one doctor there. I'll just say Dr. McF and and her assistant M. And what happened was, one doctor, one group of doctors I worked with, they said, "Well, why don't you feel comfortable working with it?" And I said, "Well, I just don't." I said, at first, I was just going to say, "Well, because I understand the people that were being called to lab aides, they needed their job, and they didn't want to protest because they had family support." So finally, what happened? One doctor asked me who I respected. I said, "Well," and I said, "Well, the reason I don't, because they're female chauvinists." I said, they do sexual abuse the female way, calling guys lab apes, and also treating them as things, treating them as and using hard power to basically take advantage of them. Now, the reason I started out with this is I watch a lot of international news, including RT as well, and that there is a valid point that RT is making about basically canceling a culture, canceling a people. Because things have happened, it doesn't mean that basically, well, just because this happened, we're going to completely cancel this culture from the earth. Well, last time someone thought about canceling a culture from the earth, they killed 95% of the culture, which was during the Holocaust. And what happened was, and it started exactly the same way. It wasn't, well, let's do the final solution now. It was basically, it started slowly. First, basically it was, oh, these people did this, these people did that, these people did this. Then eventually, what happened was, it came, well, in 33, it came, well, we don't like these people anymore, so we'll give some of them a chance to leave. So those that had a chance to leave for Germany, some of them left, others stayed. But then those that stayed, they said, well, okay, well, we don't think they should really be working in this field, so we're going to cancel them and not allow them to work. We'll take away their professional licenses. And like with this loss of the post-Cold War paradigm, what's happening now? Some of the people who are Russian, basically, the Russian people, and also other groups of people that are not liked or something else. Oh, well, you can't play at Wimbledon. You can't play soccer. You can't. Well, now, if you go back in history, it's almost exactly what the Nazis did after 1933, just before Kristallnacht in 1938. They started to say, well, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this. It's worse than Rudolph. You can't play in our reindeer games, because or unless you renounce unless you renounce your culture and your language. And that was the same thing we went through in Milwaukee. With their loudmouth German culture trying to smother us, and also using loudmouth tactics to try to scare people. And they said, well, oh, that we have an artistic temperament. No, you have a hate problem, you have a mental problem. And at one point, I ran into one person in grade school and what happened, finally, my parents were able to get an attorney, and the attorney said, well, nope. They told it. They said, you're gonna see. This one kid has hit a lot more drugs. If I have him see a psychiatrist, and guess what? They found I did have a hate problem, and his father was actually assistant superintendent, but they were trying to quote hide it. And the whole thing is basically, um, it's one thing to be proud of your culture. It's another thing to smother other people. I mean, I'm proud of my culture, but I don't smother other people. I don't expect people to act like I do. I don't expect people to think like I do. I don't expect people to say what I do. I always keep an open mind. Although I may find something objectionable, I may find something sort of hard to understand. I'm not the type to say, well, I'm just going to go. I'm not going to interact with you. I'm going to avoid you. No, that's not the way we get along in the world. We have to move forward because we all are independent on each other, and we're finding this out now. In the U.S., gas prices are going way up, and now friends of mine who started to mildly complain about gas now just to say, well, I'm only going out unless I really have to, because gas prices are 4.45 a gallon, like here, and over $5 a gallon for diesel. And with me, basically, I mean, I basically haven't had to change my lifestyle because I adopted a carbon neutral lifestyle a long time ago. Try to walk, try to take public transportation, ride share with friends, and this goes on to another program I saw on RT2. It talked about the cooperative. Um, Now, in some places, people don't like the cooperative. They say, well, um, okay, well, we're going to have a cooperative. Well, isn't that communist? No, that's not communist. Many people who survived, especially farmers in Wisconsin. The thing to remember about Wisconsin, though, is Wisconsin is a dairy state, and also a farm state. When you live outside Milwaukee, um, Madison, and basically southeastern Wisconsin, most of southeastern Wisconsin. Um, so you have this big part of the state way up here like this, and you actually only have a highway system that goes up to Wausau, which is right here, and right up here, over here's Canada, and right here is Wisconsin. So you got this big area right here and big area right here. And that when you look over there, you see cities about 5,000, 10,000. You wonder, well, how do these people, farm these big areas? Wow, not each of them has uh, buys a whole tractor set or something else like that. What they do is they form a cooperative. They realize, well, we're not going to be using the tractor every day. We're not going to be using the leaper every day. We're not going to be using the plow every day. So what do they do? They buy a tractor and they share a tractor among different farmers, a reaper, and the farm companies realize that because basically what that means is they can keep their farm equipment maintained. They can keep, and which makes it easier for the farm company to basically make the tractor and also make better machines that they can be more efficient, so they're not using low efficiency machines. Well, now in economics, um, some people feel uncomfortable talking about cooperative because basically, well, that's against capitalism. Well, um, actually, in some way, it is because basically it's a group of people working together, not necessarily for making um, the most money with making the most money with hard power. It's people working together, improving the conditions with soft power. What do I mean? For example, like I glide share to go to groceries as too many other people in my building. And the reason why they do this because even though we have a Dollar General that's close by and Piggly Wiggly, well, when you have a big bag of groceries and you're trying to lug this home and walk, it's very tiring, especially when you get older. So what do? Basically, we ride share. We go over to Piggly Wiggly, pick up some stuff. Go over to Dollar General, pick up some stuff, or even just go out on other errands like that. And say, well, why don't you take the bus? Well, the bus stop is a very far walk, and also it's very hard to carry stuff on the bus by the way it's designed. So what we do is we ride share. By ride share, what happens? So basically, instead of everyone having to have a car, we can share the car and do share our errands. But what does that do? That makes everyone that's on a very fixed budget extend that budget further, extend it further. So basically, they can have enough food. They can do things they want. And this goes back to a program that Ross Ashcroft did on Renegade about the cooperative, and basically about how people with two guests, one in New York and one in London, talking about how people are actually finding a way to get going. Now, last time I listened to a forum from WGBH in Boston, which has Giannis. Let me okay, Giannis Varoufakis. I hope I pronounced his name right. Varoufakis. And what he talked about is essentially, which is going into the second topic. Why am I willing to pay more for a burger? Well, after the pandemic, many restaurants I go to, fast food places started to open the lobby, and this one I like to go to is Wendy's and McDonald's, but I go Wendy's because I like that because that's nearby and it's also good for my walk. So I went to Wendy's and I went to order a double stack, and I ordered a double stack, and what happened was normally a double stack before the pandemic was 189. Now it's about $3.30. And what happened, a friend was with me. He said, "Well, they raised their prices." I said, "Well, I said, and I said, well, actually, I am glad they raised their prices because that means that they're paying their people better and giving them better benefits. In that case, I'm willing to pay more for a burger because basically, as was mentioned in this one podcast by this economist, I'll just say Giannis V. What happened was he was at Cambridge. He gave us part of the WGBH forum, which is part of another group for working on a better world environment. And he said, well, if we really want to stop illegal immigration, we really want to improve the world situation, we got to make sure we help those who at the bottom move up first. And that's a good idea because basically I heard years ago on what was done in Scandinavia with the unions is that basically for a while, there's this big wage disparity at one point in Scandinavia. So what one group figured out as well, look, rather than saying, "Oh, rising boat lifts all tides," and you still have this wage disparity. So look, let's help people on the bottom for give them so that they can get above a minimum level and get up past subsistence level. And then basically what happens then when everyone is then a rising boat does, but when you have this, a permanent underclass, the rising boat doesn't lift all levels. It essentially makes the underclass go farther down and makes a small group of people like this, and everyone else is like that. And no, there's no middle. So what happens by raising the price of a burger is helping people basically, eliminate this reduce this underclass and move it back to where we were in the United States, closer to the late 1970s and early 1980s, where basically many people, no matter what type of work you did as a professional, as a trade, as a service, everyone made close to the same. We could all enjoy the same benefits: golfing, going out to Wendy's, going out to a movie, going out to McDonald's, driving around on Sundays, other things. Compared to nowadays, where I see people, they have to give up the weekends. They have to work 2 weekends a month, pay for these cars, and even the biggest point that Giannis, this economist, I'll just say Giannis fee because like my last name, many people have trouble pronouncing my last name, so I just say, well, just say Diana K or just say Diana. And so I'll just say Giannis V. What happens is he talked about a very important statistic I was wondering about, but he verified. Um, in the United States, over 50% of the people cannot afford to buy the cheapest new car that's available, which is about 15,000, which is true. I mean, basically, people may have the credit rating, but they don't have the money to pay for it. They may have the money to pay for it, but they don't have the credit rating because the dealerships are so squeezed, basically, to sort of maintain us to keep going, that where they used to be able to give loans, they can't. And now that's a very interesting thing. 50%, at least 50% of the people more cannot buy the cheapest car made cheapest car that's for sale in the United States. And I'm sure this isn't just an existential instance of one. I'm sure that other existential instances in other countries and other parts of the world. And this is quite significant because to many people watching this, and those who are under in their 40s, something that's not talked about too much is like, for example, when I turned 18 and even a generation, even other people when they turned 18 earlier in 1970. Let's say you wanted to buy a car, you wanted to buy a Mustang. Okay, well, okay, you went out to a dealership. Oh, do you got a job? Yeah, I'm working full time at such and such. Oh, good. Okay, well, the payments are such and such, and it's standard 2 year term. Oh, that's great. Okay, how much? Okay, how much should I put down? Oh, $100. There you go. There's the keys. Have fun. And now what happens is that's how it used to be to buy a car. You put $100 down. If you have a full-time job, you put $100 down. Basically, 2 year term. Your car was paid off. It wasn't a lease. It's completely paid off, and you had a good quality car that's made. Also, you had a maintenance package included with the deal. So yeah, just come on in. We'll change oil and check the spark plugs and clean up for you. And that was the way it's done. But then basically what happened was that the car terms got longer, 2 years, 4 years, 6 years, 10 years. And then leasing came in, 2 years, 4 years, 6 years with mileage restrictions. So I mean, it's not common for some people to say, well, they have a 10-year lease on their car. Wow, so and when you look at cars nowadays, and even when you go to a car dealership, I went to look for a car, and what happened was I looked at it and I said, and so this guy says, well, we have a lease term of 4 years. I said, no, I want to know how much all the payments are to buy it, not lease. How much is to buy it? Oh, this man got to talk with my manager. So and see this is the point with the Sionis fee is the verifier to Sion. It's even come to a point that people who are driving, you ask them how many actually own the car versus how many lease the car. I'm sure there are many more that lease the car than own the car. And this is a case why with the collapse of the post-war paradigm, where we went from basically sort of a surplus economy to basically a deficit economy, but we didn't recycle. This is why we're getting this cancel culture, because this cancel culture is the same thing. It's a negative economy that's going to go down, because we're seeing it now. People, there's a critical crisis of baby form in the United States. One company saying we're going to do our best to get it to, and they're doing their best to fly supplies in, and it shows just how interlinked we really are, because just one issue about basically concern about bacteria contamination caused a complete supply line shift that there's a crisis in baby food. And and we're seeing this now with this thing in the Ukraine too. What happens? There's food shortages, there's energy shortages, like in Europe. Natural gas prices are going up, and especially in Germany, gasoline prices are going up. I think it's like $2.20 per liter average. So that comes out to since in Europe they use the imperial gallon, that comes out to about $8.80 a gallon of gasoline. And many people over there are saying more than out. It's like they don't know how long they can survive with that, because they have to decide between food or medicine or energy. And then when we have this cancel culture, it's like, if you're, since your government is at war, but we're gonna claim that everyone is part of the government, so we're gonna cancel this culture. You can't play tennis, you can't play soccer, and other stuff, and that defeats the Olympic spirit, because even during the 36 Olympics, people did not like the Nazis, but the Olympic Committee still let the German people compete. Even though the government was Nazi, they still let the German people compete in the Olympics in 1936. So what are we going to do when we have the next Olympics? Are we going to say, well, but this thing in Ukraine is still going on? We're going to say, okay, well, we're not going to have anyone who's Russian or Russian derived compete in the Olympics because this war in Ukraine, because they're part of the problem. The people are not part of the problem. It's the governments that are part of the problem. And I am concerned that basically the issues on both sides, because when I watch different accounts and hear about one report from one French journalist a few days ago about attitudes of what he heard of some Ukraine soldiers sort of saying, well, oh, when we see these types of people, we're going to skim them. I won't mention the group's names like that because basically I don't want to repeat exactly what they said because it's very atrocious with Ukraine. But it does show a low level mentality. It does show an inbred hatred and really. So it means that basically both the hands are not perfectly clean on both sides. And the other thing is when journalists do report on something that's not quite the party line, as what's been told in many international journals account, and the question by Ukraine authorities, especially special service police, when they don't question what's the party line, it begs about what type of journalistic freedom exists because even the United Nations um, in 2018 will report about concerns about journalistic freedom in the Ukraine then before the February 24th events. And it's also like what happens in journalistic freedom in other countries. Although what the United Nations was wise about was simply this: although journalistic um, freedoms are very much trying to pushed or under control in other countries or even trampled upon, they're wise enough to say the group doing it is not the people, it's the government, it's not the people. So basically, you can't blame the Ukraine people for having some government groups that may feel that they need to trample or there's some government groups in other countries that may. It's not the people doing it, it's the government, and that's what the UN report was wise about. And this is the reason why we can't get into a point of canceling culture. I mean, like this thing on RT about canceling Russian culture. There are some points of it that's valid because basically I remember being smothered in Milwaukee and how happy I was basically to work in San Francisco, in La Jolla, you know, basically, later in my career because to get out the Midwest loudmouth German smother culture, or as a friend of mine from Illinois said, to get out of the farm fields of Illinois, because what he meant then is it was the same type of culture, but it existed in the farm fields. Like, well, you either work in Chicago, or you work on the farm fields, and that's why basically even today when he thinks of working in Chicagoland, which Chicagoland basically is actually Chicago, Milwaukee, mega city, which goes like this, south side of Chicago, all the way up to Menominee Falls, out towards Waukesha, so a population of about 15 million people. And we those of us that live outside Milwaukee, outside Chicago, in this middle zone, we learned a long time ago not to do this smothering of cultures, or canceling of cultures. Some people call this basically a fusion of Wisconsin, Illinois attitude, because we learned a long time ago the old smother culture of loudmouth Germans in which used to be called the state of Milwaukee, or the one side of critical thought, which we used to call the one party's People Republic of Chicago, or the um, far extreme liberal thought of Dane County Democrats. We realize that this narrowness, one narrowness here, one narrowness here, no, that's not the way to go. What we realize in the middle is, we're not, like when you look at the background of this picture, it's actually my actual apartment. You see many different things. You see my doll collection, flowers, a vase, um, part of my library, my toolbox where I have some of my components, some of my medical books, um, and so we learned, in the area between what we used to call the state of Milwaukee, the one party People's Republic of Chicago, and the extreme uh, viewpoints of Dane County Democrats, that there is a solution where everyone is involved, where you don't have to practice hard power. And it is like basically like Ross Ashcroft mentioned on his show Renegade about African power when he's talking about cooperative. You can go quickly if you go by yourself, but you can go farther if you go in a group. And how true that is. For example, even with open source. Open source is an example of a group. The Arduino, you know, microcontroller projects are a group. It's interesting because when I started with the Arduino project, I did a lot of this in college, and sometimes you forget what you learn in college, and so I wanted to know how to do some of these things. So what I do? Went on the internet, went to the Arduino group. I saw, oh, how to write a program to turn on an LED, how to write a program to modulate an LED, how to read a temperature sensor, how to read. I mean, as a review of, but again, it was all in a group. It was all verified, tested, and the people put it. They didn't charge anything. They said, no, look, this is example software. I said, look, we want more people to be able to get into this and do this. Same thing with open source because, and open source had the same objections that are being heard now regarding those who are trying to defend a very failed system that capitalism got us into a globalism, gone amok, and other things. It's like, well, how can you trust people who can't get up or go to work at 9 o'clock in the morning to write a better operating system than Microsoft or someone else? And so at the 95 dinner, Mike and I were there, and I said, look, how about let's do this? When I get back, I'm going to buy the Slackware module, which is Slackware 1.0. This all. I said, I'll try. Mike said the same thing. So we both had 46 computers. We tried it. First thing I did was I updated my memory from basically, I think it was 4 megabytes then to 16 megabytes, which is 1/1000th the memory of what's used on computers today. And so I tried to say, oh, this is great. The only thing is I had to partition my hard drive manually because they hadn't loaded the code to do that. So and basically, so I partitioned it, and then someone said, well, you can't access your Windows drive. Well, another group said, well, look, okay, there's a way to solve this. So what happens? An idea started, but the things people work together as a cooperative group, and they wrote Samba, and Samba basically allowed Linux to lead a Windows drive, and now basically when people think of Linux, even Microsoft, instead of or other companies instead of punching the penguin, now realize let's make friends with the penguin. The penguin is a valid species as well. It's not something to be punched. So they made friends with Linux, and now basically we're getting better operating systems, we're getting better computers, we're getting better languages. And see, this is the way to go, not this thing, well, oh, we're going to smother this culture. I mean, what's being done with, like what RT mentioned, the special, what's trying to smother Russian culture. And so it's in some ways, when I look back, it was almost what was done in the 30s with another culture, basically before the final solution started, because there was the smothering, there was the cancellation, there was not allowing them to work, not allowing them to play. And really, the Olympic movement is supposed to be about everyone working together, because even the 36 Olympics, um, although the Nazis were in power, the German people were allowed to participate as athletes in the Olympics. After World War II, there were other countries that had different types of government, they had different types of regimes, but yet the people were able to participate. Now that's a very important point. Um, People are not the government, and they're not completely the government. So this thing about smothering culture, smothering Russian culture, banning Russian people from participating in arts, sports, other types of things, because of the collapse of this new post-war paradigm, saying, well, oh, we're supporting Ukraine. No, you're really not, just supporting hate. And it's the same thing as what this French journalist observed when he saw some Ukrainian soldiers saying, oh, if we see these black people or Jewish people, we're going to skin them alive. That made me shudder. I mean, it's like, they're that dumb, um, they're that inbred, they're that ignorant. And I was thinking, oh my God, I hope that's not indigent upon many people of the Ukraine army. But this French journalist, what he did is he was wise enough this time not to discuss it until he was back in France, because he knew probably that other journalists who tried to discuss things that they saw that were not, quote, the party line, were questioned or something else, because in the UN report, Ukraine did have a report where they were concerned about journalistic freedom even before the February 24th events. So we gotta move past this canceling of culture, canceling of people. And what we got to do is like to be honest with you, I'm willing to pay more for a double stack, because I know that now basically the people working at Wins are being paid better, and they're getting better benefits. Next, just as a final thought, um, the issues about where people have concerns about unions reforming. In a way, I'm glad to see that, because in a way like that, cases like Starbucks, Target, other places, yes, there are cases where a union needs to form, and they should be allowed to form. In other cases where basically there's issue of heavy-handedness, then basically people should be able to work on a cooperative basis. And what this Giannis V mentioned, he said, well, anyone that works should be able to own stock, which is true. My dad believed that too. Everyone that works should be able to own stock and also share in the profits. When I worked in retail for a little bit, the company I worked for actually had that policy. We didn't get stock, but we had profit sharing. The profit sharing was split equally. So people at the upper end got the same amount as people on the low end. But then when the company switched hands, then what happened? They switched to where people on the upper end got most of the profit sharing, people on the low end didn't. What happened? Many people left, and that's why they became dissatisfied with the union, because when the union kowtowed to allowing basically unequal profit sharing, that's when people said, no, we don't need a union. We'd rather work on a cooperative. And now the stores I shop, like the Piggly Wiggly and the Dollar General, they're more like a cooperative. People are paid equal profit sharing, and also they're paid basically above a subsistence wage, so that basically they can do activities. They can dress nice. They can wear nice clothes when they go to church. They can wear nice clothes when they're off work. They can have enough food to feed the families. Do daily activities, and live a good lifestyle. So we need to really stop this cancel culture, because just because the same February 4th, we should allow all people to participate in sports, arts, and we should remember it's not the people who did this; it's the government, and even inside Russia, people who have tried to speak. Some have been arrested in that, because for speaking out, saying they don't support what happened. But basically, what's different between other parts of the world, basically in in the United States and some other countries like the United States, is you have freedom after speech. You can speak, and you can have freedom after speech. You don't have to be worried about being sent to jail. And even with some of our allies, it took basically Canada until I think 1960s to have a Bill of Rights. But there still is a case, even if you go to Canada, if you don't have the same freedoms that you do as an American in America. And that's why people, when Americans travel, when we travel, nowadays we are told, remember, when you travel to another country, although you're American, you do not have the same constitutional protections. You have to work by their laws, or what the Romans would say, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. So we really need to get back to working together, because we're going to see more of this food crisis, more of this energy crisis, and with this hatred of smothering Russian culture and smothering Russian people. No, that's not the way to go, because the Russian people during World War II paid dearly to preserve the freedoms that we enjoy now in defeating the Nazis. I think 28 million people in their armed services were killed, along with many millions of civilians who were killed in the sieges of Stalingrad and Leningrad, 943-day siege. Wow. And and like when it shows one government start taking bulldozers and picking up all the flowers left in memorial, because basically there's this current canceling of say, well, we're going to cancel the people in this culture because we support. Actually, what happens, you're supporting hate when you cancel people culture. If you really want to end this war in Ukraine, stop the canceling, stop the hate. Realize it's not the people, it's the government, and also make inroads to work again with people in that, though, because many people in this area where the government's picking up all these flowers, they keep coming with the flowers. They realize, because they said, this one country, Russia, during World War II, sacrificed 28 million of its soldiers to stop the Nazis, many millions of its people, and that's a big sacrifice, because that's equivalent to almost 2 generations of people. And those who are French realize that, in World War One, French lost a whole generation of men, and the reason why in World War II, why France decided to go with a split country to basically surrender to the Nazis until they could fight back, was so they wouldn't lose another generation of men. So we got to think about this. Stop the canceling of the Russian people and the Russian culture. It's not them who invaded Ukraine. It's a government decision. It was a government decision, and it's basically we need to get back to talking again, and also this thing about Ukraine is not completely one side's evil, one side is good. There is a big gray area here. And when I watch some news on the international media, I see basically a full discussion compared to sometimes when I watch U.S. media, because I see just a narrow discussion, just to say, oh, this is happening in Ukraine, this. But what happens, I rarely see reports that go over to the other side and say, okay, well, let's see what the other side's doing. Well, let's see, about 50 years ago, we used to do that on the U.S. side. Instead of just talking with this side, we used to have people go all over. We used to have people talk with people on this side, people on this side, people in the big gray area. And they would tell the American people exactly what this is. Now we're talking with this. And some people would say, well, I don't agree with this person, or I don't agree. That's fine. You don't have to agree with this person, but at least listen to what they have to say, and see with what they say about this topic as valid. That's all people are asked to do. But nowadays people have these blinders on. They're just being told, well, okay, well, we only want you to see here, and we only want you to listen when we turn on our earphones to listen to what we say. Please don't do that. Listen to foreign news. Listen to U.S. news. I listen to RT because I have a TV I can listen to RT, and I watch our Renegade Going Underground, and also the RT broadcast to keep up. And I keep an open mind, but there's some facts on the RT broadcast that are true about basically like what this French reporter mentioned, and also about cancer and culture, because basically that's how the Holocaust started, because we literally people in Germany, Nazis in Germany, tried to cancel the Jewish culture. First saying, well, doing this whisper thing, or saying these derogatory things. Then it came to like what this French reporter said, well, if we see black or Jewish people, we're going to skin them alive, like what he heard some of these Ukraine soldiers say. And hopefully it's not all the Ukraine soldiers that think that way. And then eventually what happened was, what the Nazis said, so, well, we don't want you working as a psychiatrist. We don't want you working as a doctor. We don't want to work as a chemist. Again, cancel culture, just like what's happening now. If your national or ancestry is Russian, we don't want you working as a ballerina. We don't want you working as a soccer player. We don't want you participating in the Olympics. We don't want you participating in Wimbledon. I'm glad the French Open has still kept an open policy, that is realizing it's important that the people participate and not to give into narrow-minded hate thoughts and stuff. And then finally, what happened was, by the time Kristallite came, it says, well, in addition to not allowing Jewish people work, practice, or even enjoy benefits of society going to a park, um, then came basically the Christianites finally, and finally the final solution. And if we continue on this thing about killing even Russian culture or the talents of Russian people, we're heading down the same way that we headed down in World War II. And because when people say, well, we're not going to do that, we're not going to let Russian people participate, actually, you're actually doing the same thing the Nazis did, because that's how the Nazis did it. First, they picked one group of people to pick on. Then, like an onion, once that group was gone, they picked another one, they picked another one. And there's a famous phrase that was said by a Lutheran minister who originally was a supporter of the Nazis, but when the Allies finally rescued him from the death camps, he said this famous phrase, which I'll paraphrase. At first, they came for them. I didn't say anything. Then they came for another group of them. I didn't say anything. Then they came for yet another group of them. I didn't say anything. Finally, they came for me. There's no one left to say anything. Thank God for the Allies and the Russians who freed me. And that was a famous phrase from World War II from a Lutheran minister who was freed from a death camp by the Russians and the Allies. So, well, let me know what you think. You can reach me. I prefer to be reached by Twitter at Diana1A or Ideas with Diana, IDIEASWITHDIANA. Well, let me know what you think, and I'll be back shortly at another time.